I was wondering,
Yes, Alex.
so with regard to the question about the sutra that we have been uh, 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 going deep into,
Yes.
do I aware of any like um, either a cartoon or kind of like movie, like or animation that's being created like based on that, like or like some of that story as it is laid out, not as it being, told and retold later, but on
No,
the
no. From what I've seen and all the stories of the life of the Buddha are much more compacted, and a lot of the elements that we read about in the Lalita Vistara Sutra were, kind of either glossed over or they were compressed into several other events and so on at the same time. So no, for that extensive play in full that we saw, I haven't seen anything like that. Now that doesn't mean that it couldn't be something. So I would, if you're interested, do a search on YouTube. I think is the best resource for that. And if you find something, I'd certainly like to know about it and take a look at it myself and see if it's something that we can incorporate in our studies and facilities. Okay. Okay. So what I thought we could talk about tonight is what we're trying to do. I think that everybody would agree is that we're trying to purify our lives. If we need to purify our lives, that implies that we're leading an impure life. If we were leading a pure life, we'd already be our true nature and so on. We'd already be what we might call Buddha or what we might call Christ or Yahweh or whatever, God, however you might call it. So we're human beings and we're going through this experience to be able to purify ourselves so that we don't have suffering for ourselves and that we can help other beings to overcome their suffering. So there's this innate duality that we're familiar with that is present in the phenomenal nature. The nature of phenomenal nature is the suffering, is the confusion, the five poisons, etc., plus all this, manifestation and form and so on, and all this intellectual, understandings that we have of what it is that might be correct, some might be incorrect, and so on. So we have this life in order to go through the process of purifying ourselves so that we can reach our pure nature, unfold our pure nature, remove the blockages, the obstacles to be able to see our pure nature. In order to do this, there's two basic ways of doing it that we are been exposed to. One is a gradual path where we're learning basic things. We're learning about the five families of the Buddha. We're learning about the five poisons. We're learning about the 84,000 emotions and so on. And we're going through this process that is, in the Jewel Ornamental Liberation and other such books, Lam Rim texts from other traditions that are guiding us through that process. It's a gradual path. And we start off in the Hinayana with learning discipline. We go through the sutras, learning, the stories and so on, the words of the Buddha, the time of the Buddha, the practices of the Buddha, and so on. We're going through all of that, and then we get to the devotion. We get to the Mahayana, and we begin to learn about emptiness, and we learn about the six paramitas. We learn about the 37 practices, steps to enlightenment, and so on. So all these things we go through there, the process of devotion, of love, kindness, bodhicitta, we go through that. And then we continue on and we go through the Vajrayana, or the Mantrayana, or the Tantrayana, the different names that is all called. And that's the wisdom tradition, where we go through the gradual process of ourselves recognizing our deity within ourselves, that we have that deity within ourselves. All the deities are personifications of that pure energy, of that purity that we seek. So by role playing, by doing those practices and so on, being empowered to do that, we begin to shed our skin, if you will, of our impurities, and what results is a pure nature and so on. So this is the gradual path. However, there is a spontaneous occurrence that can happen through our meditations. We can spontaneously, all of a sudden, be in a state of samadhi, a state of enlightenment, a state of balance, a state of liberation, where all this is revealed to us in its ultimate absolute form, if you will, if I can use that word, form, and we experience that. We have that experience. The question becomes, how stable is that? So we have that ability to be able to have that realization over and over again. And when we do, the stability of it only comes if we have been successful in the gradual path to be able to give us the tools to be able to sustain and maintain that samadhi, that lifestyle, that ability as a human being to be able to maintain. So the two kind of, they dovetail, they do go together. We can obtain, or we can go through the gradual path and then have that moment of spontaneity, spontaneous, experience. And because of the stability that we've created from going through the gradual path, we can stay and maintain that. We can also go through and have that spontaneous experience as an impure being, but momentarily be pure enough to be able to have that experience, but then it's lost on us because we don't have the stability of the gradual path to be able to stabilize it. So both work together. In order for us to understand this a little bit more, if we interchange the word enlightenment for liberation, for myself, I do that often because I think it helps, because the enlightenment has become this batted around by so many different people, and I think it's misconstrued by most of us, by most people and so on, can mean a lot of things, enlightenment. All of a sudden the light goes on and so on and stays on. And, figuratively that does happen, but it may be only very, very temporary. The point of using the word liberation gives us something more to be able to intellectualize, that we're liberating ourselves from the things that are holding us back from that transference of what we might call enlightenment. So that liberation comes in little parts, comes in little packets. The enlightenment itself comes in little packets that, when we have it, it's a huge thing that happens, but it doesn't last. So with the liberation, with the notion of the liberation, being able to see that, we're able to see what we've done to accomplish overcoming the things that are holding us back. And that in itself helps our stability in being able to, when these things occur, we're able to sustain them better. We're able to sustain them more. There's more of an intellectual awareness of what the process was and what the result of the process has been, and so on. So I've used that for many years, and it helps me tremendously. So, we can discuss this. We're going to have a discussion after this. So we can discuss this and see how this relates, how you relate to this. As we are moving through this gradual path, there's many tools that we have. There's all these, 4 of these, 5 of those, 6 of these, 37 of these, all these different intellectual concepts and notions and so on that we have been brought to us by the masters, by the Buddha, and by the masters who have come after, and maybe we've had experience with them, and the enumeration of these things helps us to, like I said, stabilize this. So we may have discovered some of these things all by ourselves, through doing the practices and by doing the meditation and so on. We may have had those kinds of experiences and so on, and now we're able to name them. We're able to point them out to ourselves and be able to kind of, come back to them and know what our goals are and so on, and know what the blockages, what the obscurations are, what are the things that are pulling us back to not be able to stabilize these things. So one of the things in this way of being able to articulate this, to understand this process, are the enlightened activities, or the enlightening activities, or the liberating activities. It's a gradual process that at some point all of a sudden becomes spontaneous, becomes instantaneous. But there's this gradual process. So these 4 enlightened activities are the properties, are the characteristics of the enlightened ones, of the Tathagata, of the Buddha, whatever, and of other beings of other traditions and so on, who have achieved this level, but maybe call it other names and so on. It's just as valid. The behavior is the important thing, and the activities are the important thing. We, as being on the path, to be able to recognize that, are confronted with situations where, with enlightened activities, if we know what the enlightened activities are of the enlightened ones, those who are realized of the Buddhas, we can begin to recognize them within ourselves. We can recognize the challenges, and we can apply the activities to be able to kind of, wear down those challenges and polish up our successes so that we take on more and more and more and more of the characteristics of the liberated one, of the enlightened one, and so on. There may be things that continue to pull us back, but there may be other things that we have been very successful in and been, and are able to exalt that. We're able to radiate that light. We're able to bring luminosity to those things. But some things are a little bit more difficult. But the point is that through the gradual path, if we know what these enlightened activities are, we can then begin to stabilize them within ourselves. So these 4 enlightened activities, I wrote them down, and I'm going to screen share. So here are these 4 enlightening, liberating activities. So you may have heard this before. I probably talked about this one time or another. So the first one is pacification or purification. The second one is enrichment or increasing. The next one is magnetizing or attracting. And the last one, the fourth one, is subduing or challenging. So we go back with these again. We say that the pacification, the purification is we're presented with all these issues, all these things within ourselves, these life experiences and so on, and our physical body and our intellectual mind, and all the permutations of the way this goes through its myriad confrontations in our lives and so on, and the emotions that rise up and so on, so that we learn to pacify those obstructions. We use to pacify our anger, to pacify things that are disrupting us, that are causing us upset, and so on. And as we're pacifying that, we're also purifying our thought forms that are connecting us to these issues and so on. So we're going through a process of purification in the pacification, by way of the pacification. We may be successful in that for a given issue, and then but we may not. If we're not, we may need to go to the next activity, which is enrichment or increasing. What this means is we need to learn more about what the issues are, what the issues of the obstructions are, what the causes of the obstructions are, how these manifested and so on, and the enrichment of how it is that we overcome those things. How do we transform? How do we turn that around? So we're enriching our intellectual knowledge, we're enriching our life and so on, we're increasing our knowledge, we're increasing our abilities, our skillful means to be able to do this. So this is a liberating activity, the enrichment, the increasing that we go through. So, through these teachings and the process that we've been going through, this is what we've been full of, is this enrichment and increasing. The next thing is, as we get more adept at that, as we become more proficient at this, we begin to magnetize, we begin to attract disciples, we begin to attract others who come to us, who appear to us through through the spontaneity of the energy that we are presenting and so on, that we become the embodiment for. People come to us, things come to us, knowledge comes to us, people come to us, solutions come to us. We attract these things, these energies and so on, like that. So, so these are enlightening, liberating activities of doing this, and we're cognizant of this, and we're preparing ourselves for this. And so as we are going through the pacification, purification, and the enrichment increasing, we may be thinking of ways in which we can explain this, not just to ourselves, but to other beings, to our family, to our friends, and people who, in an environment like this where we're in a group and we want to discuss these things. How do I present my thoughts to other people and so on? How do I magnetize their thoughts? How do I attract their thoughts? And how am I magnetized and attracted by their thoughts too? It's not simply everybody coming to me, it's everything being as a whole, on everything coming together, and recognizing that, realizing that, seeing the magnetizing and the attracting as you are part of. Sometimes it's coming to you, sometimes you're going to it. The fourth one is subduing or challenging. What this means is that there are some things that are very deeply entrenched. And through the process that we've been going through thus far, we're recognizing that there are these challenging situations that we're not really clear at, we're not really good at this time. But meanwhile, the events rise up and so on, and we need to have a way to be able to challenge ourselves, to challenge these events, to dig in and say, I'm going to dig this out. I'm not going to wait for it to come to me. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do what I can to bring this up, to bring the fruition of this up, to to confront our difficulties, challenging our difficulties. Sometimes it's other people that are coming to us and they're presenting questions, they're presenting ideas that aren't matching with ours, but yet they become fuel for us to be able to apply the pacification, the enrichment, the magnetizing, so on like that, the principles of those things, for us to be able to apply those things. So through the practice of subduing, through the practice of challenging these other things and so on, we're digging out the things that are hidden, the things that are deep within us or deep within other people, and we're trying to find the solutions by not just waiting for the solutions to come to us, that we are processing to find the solutions. We're digging in to find the solutions. So these four enlightened, liberating activities are, in their purest form, are the activities of the Tathagatas. This is what they do. They do this all the time with their body, speech, and mind. Their life is nothing but these enlightened activities. We are trying to develop that. We would like to get there. If you're not, that's why we're here, I think. So now I'd like to open this up to a question and answer. So does anybody have any thoughts about this? What do you think about this, these enlightened activities? So please turn your microphones on, and we need to challenge ourselves and dig this out a little bit. Yes, Kunga.
Thank you, Pema for sharing these. I was wondering if it's also helpful to look at this through the lens of karma. And so, because I've been listening to some courses talking about how we can relate with the ideas of karma as a way to enrich our spiritual practice. And the idea, I guess, to simplify it would be, the number one pacification is this idea of acknowledging how karma works, that when we do positive actions, positive things are promoted or result, and we do negative things, negative actions result. And if we're on this path of building our spiritual practice, we need to focus on decreasing the number of negative things that we're doing. So this will be kind of like pacification. I'm going to stop doing those things which create negative results and start focusing more on those things that do positive results. And the enrichment increasing might be along that second part. The first part is you recognize that if you do things negative things will happen. So you want to stop that because that's creating just more barriers for your spiritual path going forward. And then the build part on that, to enrich your spiritual life, you do positive things. And then the idea is that through doing these positive things, as your karma ripens, you will experience more positive things in your life. And this is sort of this idea of magnetizing, maybe attracting, is that good things continue to happen to you because of good things you've done in the past. And as you eliminate the bad things you do and the more good things you do, it continues that cycle, building on it. But despite doing this, you're going to have these maybe deep-rooted karmas there, which are just maybe related to the past. There's your karmic inheritance from, you could say past lives, you could say, you inherited it from your ancestors, but they're things that you've done in the past already. They were bad things, and you're still experiencing those events going forward. But you can still do things, according to these teachings, you can still do things in your daily life to atone for those past misdeeds. So you can kind of sort of eliminate or prevent those bad karmas from ripening in the same way. And the teacher talks about things like, he gave an example. This person who was a Tibetan who was from a family that I think it was raised goats and ate and sold goat meat. And so he confessed that he had that experience from his past, and he wasn't no longer in that field of making a living, but he wanted to atone for all the animals that they had raised and slaughtered. And so they told him, the Lama told him, well, you need to go and purchase a sheep, and then you need to just care for that animal for the rest of its life. That's how you're going to atone for all those animals you raised and slaughtered. You're just basically this animal, you're just, however long it lives, you're just going to care for it. And that's how you're going to atone for that past karma. So when you're bringing this up, I was wondering if that might be another way to understand these four teachings, or if you thought, or does that be, what do you think? Thank you.
Well, sure, and I think the simple answer there is that that's an example of pacification. You're pacifying, the emotion of the ill will that would have been directed towards those animals that have been slaughtered and so on. And now you're pacifying that emotion, the root of that emotion, through this purification of taking care of one of these animals and so on like that, and helping it and so on like that. As it does that, your life becomes enriched and you become more powerful and magnetizing. Other people come and say, oh, well, what are you doing? Why haven't you sacrificed this animal? And then they're coming to you for the answer, and then you can help them and so on. And this process happened because of the challenge that you made for yourself to go to a teacher to say, hey, I've done these terrible things. These things have been done in my family or something like that. How can I atone for this? And so through this challenging, through this subduing, it comes back and feeds back to the pacification as the answer to that. So I think it's a good example, and I think karma is one of the things that are on the path for us to recognize how they got there, what they are, and how it is that we're going to ripen that karma and therefore overcome that karma. Does anybody else have a comment or a question?
Lance, I'm doing my karma retreats right now with the 3-year refuge program. We're on karma as one of the outer preliminaries, and today actually was in refuge doing my 4th day. I spent all day doing contemplations, and so along the lines of what you and Kunga are saying right now, so I think there's the karma that you've had from your previous behaviors or habitual tendencies, and then as soon as you understand truly karma as the virtue as an action, and then non-virtue as an action, so the good things, happy things, and the bad things, it allows you to be very skillful at pursuing virtuous activities, like the card you gave us, body, speech, and mind, the 10. And I really didn't understand that until like sitting there and contemplating it generally, but when you contemplate it for yourself as an individual, what your habitual tendencies are based off of your karma bank, right? Whether you're more likely to be a gossip or lie or steal, like the different combinations. I finally understood the 84,000 psycho-afflictive emotions after
So, so
contemplating.
let me interrupt just to ask you.
Yeah,
So, of these four enlightened activities,
yeah,
that particular example that you're bringing up, which of the
yeah.
four would it be?
What example do you mean? Contemplation?
The process of thinking about the 10 virtues and the 10 non-virtues and recognizing things that you hadn't recognized before. Which of these four would you attribute that to?
I'm guessing purification. I don't know. Enrichment? Maybe enrichment, I think. Enrichment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's,
You're enriching your wisdom, your knowledge, and
yeah.
your skillful means,
Yes, I would
which
agree.
then has, the property of being purified and the attracting, magnetizing, and the challenging. They all go hand in hand with each other. But
Correct.
but you can see that there is a process.
Very much so. Like it's not, kind of what you were saying, Al, like you can get into meditation and get these beautiful glimpses, but you really need to, if you want it to stick in your unconsciousness as you reincarnate, you really have to etch it into like you have to do this work. You have to keep repeating it so that at the moment of your death, this is all you're thinking about is the Dharma.
Well,
So
you're
that,
just in that mode, yes.
yeah, like your brain is just
Yes.
thinking of Dharma.
Your
Yeah,
heart is open.
correct. And
Your
you know,
heart, your brain is at rest, and your
yes.
heart is open.
You know, it's funny, and I don't know if anyone, Kunga, if you've had this experience. What I noticed a shift through doing this enriching activities is whereas before my brain would go, my mind would go to like a negative conversation when I wasn't being super skillful, intentional, and contemplative. Now it'll go to just, this is so silly. I'll just start doing Om Mani Padme Hum. Like my brain just drifts to a mantra, or I'll even start reciting, taking the Bodhisattva vow. Verses will just start popping into my head, and I can't believe I'm able to tell you this because I have so many negative events that happen with the work I do that it's easy to just relive that conversation. My brain doesn't want to do it anymore. It wants to just start saying, done. Like I'm even humming it like a pop song. It's kind of funny. I can't believe it's happened.
Okay. Well, let's keep moving on. I
Yeah.
want to give everybody a chance to talk, and we got some more things to talk about with this. So, Alex or Brendan, do you have anything that you want to say at this point, or can I move to the next um, set of something to look for, and then we can talk more about that?
Uh,
Brendan, you have something you want to say?
yeah, I'll just briefly say that sometimes I like to go onto Reddit because they have a Buddhist group in Reddit that sometimes there's very interesting things in there. Somebody was saying that you can have an outstanding meditation practice, but if you're, I don't know, robbing banks or, you know, assaulting people or doing things that are highly unskillful from a karmic perspective, that your practice will go nowhere because the first thing you have to do is you have to uh, live a morally upstanding life. And so what I'm seeing here kind of reminds me of that, is that these are some first steps that you have to take. So purification, for example. So I'm just reminded of that.
Right. So he's going through the process of the meditation, but there's no purification of the activities.
Exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alex, you have anything you want to add at this point?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll throw in this perspective from sort of physics point of view or biology evolutionary point of view. Everything, and you know, we have this problem in of how life begins. You know, everything seems to following the path of chaos. Everything's supposed to be going into randomness, but somehow life on Earth starts and consciousness begins, and things going the other way around. You know, in some corners of our, you know, little speck of dust in the universe. So we can think of it maybe as um, uh, uh, those involution, where things are kind of spread out. You know, Big Bang. You know, big burst of, you know, supernovas and planets kind of, and then planets start to form and things get a little more orderly, and finally here and there may be life, and finally we as humans also get born. We first very oblivious to who we are and where we're going. We first very ignorant, very innocent but ignorant, and we start doing things and make a lot of mistakes. But once you know, there a moment or two comes, then we start realizing, oh, maybe I should have done it a little bit differently, and or maybe I should have do actually many different things differently, and gradually like build up this momentum where now we take sort of things under our own control, on our own kind of get the reins of uh, power on ourselves, and start purifying, increasing, and attracting, and in the end, challenging ourselves and others. You know, whoever open for challenge, I would say. Probably we, as a Buddhist, we don't want maliciously challenge
Well, of course not.
people. But yeah. So, and eventually we get our mind organized into higher levels of consciousness, and then maybe we don't need physical body that can limit us, and
Okay.
maybe like refined forms of matter,
All right. So
state.
with the scientific approach that you're using, let me move to the next set
Yeah.
of examples here. And there'll be plenty more time for us to talk, but I want to get all these ideas on the table first. So now, here are the activities. Now we need to have some tools in which to utilize, to implement these activities. We're in phenomenal nature. We're matter, you know, but we're energy that, completely penetrates all this matter and so on. But we still have this matter to deal with. So we look at what are the five elements of the phenomenal nature. This is what we have, no matter where we are in this world, or if we go to the far flung universe as far as the space telescope can see and so on, there's still these five elements of phenomenal nature, because this phenomenal nature is inclusive of all this matter, but it's also inclusive of all the thought processes that we go through, all the mind processes, because phenomenal nature includes the intellect as well, includes the mind as well. It includes the body and it includes the mind as we are talking about it right now. So these five elements are the element of water, the element of earth, the element of fire, the element of air, and the element of space. So to help us to understand how these are tools for this, we use the example of the garden. And if we look at that, our life is like a garden that is just full of weeds and full of, old trees and vines and so on like that. And we need to be able to plant seeds that are going to grow into being a pure garden, what we're looking for, our life to be a pure garden and so on. So we begin by clearing things out, taking out all the things that are unnecessary, getting rid of them and so on. And then we begin to plant the seeds that we want to grow, the lotus seeds, if you will, and we begin to apply water, which is going to deliver, the moisture that the seed needs to sprout and to be able to grow. It needs that moisture in order to be able to do that. Then the earth is the nutrients. We've taken that seed and we put it into the earth. And in that earth are all these decaying matter and things like that, of things that happened in the past and have decayed, have died, and so on. But they are going to reanimate the seed and sprout and give it energy, give it food so that it can grow and so on. So now we come to the fire. And the fire produces the heat, because the seed is not going to grow, the sprout is not going to come if there's not warmth, if there's not heat. If it's in a frozen environment, it's just going to go dormant if it doesn't kill it. It's just going to go dormant for some period of time. But when there's heat, it promotes the growth, and the seed begins to germinate and so on like that. And we begin to have a garden that is giving us fruit and vegetables and flowers and the things that we need to sustain our lives. We also need air. It needs to have a movement to it. The seeds, sometimes those seeds, are in the pods of the stamen and the parts of the flowers and so on, and they need to blow about, they need to go about and so on to be able to land someplace else and to continue the process of the garden growing, being the seeds falling in the earth and the water coming, the fire coming, the heat, and then more and more seeds coming. But we also need the movement of the stem, of the flower, of the leaf, of the fruit, of the plant that is growing. It needs to be able to move and so on. So the wind is helping it to do that. And so that's all part of the air, the movement of what this is doing. The last part is the space, that it has to have the room in order to be able to do all this. If you plant a seed, maybe it's a tomato plant or whatever you can think of, but then you take a box or you take some kind of a container and you put it over top of the plant that is now growing, it's going to stifle the growth of that plant. It's going to stunt it because it doesn't have enough space for that plant to come up and grow. So it's just going to simply wither away after some period of time. So we need to have space in order to grow. So these 5 elements, when you think about this, these 5 elements are thought processes, are the processes of matter growing, of the nature world of plants, botany and so on, but also biology, animal life, insect life, all different life, all the phenomenal nature have these 5 elements comprised in them. Even rocks and even metals, even things that you wouldn't think of as having an animate life are still part of this process. They may be part of the earth, they may be part of the fire, part of the air. By dissecting this and thinking about this, contemplating this, and meditating on this, and thinking about, who you are, and scientifically looking at your skin and then peeling away your skin and seeing the tissues that are there, the muscle that is there, the tendons that are there, and so on. And then you go down and you look at what the skin is made of, you look at what the tendons are made of, you look at what the muscle is made of, and you go down to tissues, you go down to the molecular level, and then from the molecular level you go down to the atomic level, and then from the atomic level you go down to the subatomic level and everything, and you appreciate, these 5 elements of all this phenomenal nature. How all this comes together, because the water is what? Basically atomic structure. The earth is basically atomic structure. The fire is atomic structure. The air and the space are all basically atomic structure. That we, as human beings at this stage of our knowledge, can appreciate that, can recognize that, can appreciate that. So now, going back to these 4 enlightened activities, are using these tools in order to know what is going on around us, what this phenomenal nature is. We're trying to identify this. Part of the Dharma is learning what makes things up. what things are, the what, the why, and the how. So we need to understand things at that primal level of what it is. And then we think about why it is, and then how it is that it got to be what it is, and what we can do to continue that or to stifle that. So these are the tools, the building blocks, the mechanisms to understand this phenomenal nature. So we can do this with our psyche. We can do this with our mind. We can do this with the Dharma and so on. What it is that we think about, how we think about things. What is the water in that process? Because it's going to be a symbolic water. What is the earth in that process? It's going to be a symbolic earth. What is the fire? What is the air? What is the space that is being represented symbolically for this intellectual mental process to be able to be going on?
Finally got it? Great. Oh, you're on the phone? No, go ahead. Oh.
Okay, Bernie's with us now, so that's
I'm
good.
sorry.
That's okay. It's good that you're with us.
Should have muted myself. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. Let me change my screen a little bit here so I can see everybody. Excuse me one second. Okay. All right, so now I can see everybody. And let me clean this one thing up here. Okay. So, can you see this dynamic that is being set up here between the pure activities and the elements, the tools that we have to work with these activities, that the activities utilize, that they implement in order for us to build up this knowledge base? Any comments on this? Gunga?
May I just start?
Okay, Alex?
I mean, do you sometimes refer this as elementals as opposed to elements? And just on that note, I like in my mind, I tend to think of this not so much as some kind of substance, but more as a quality of substance. I don't mean to like have it in contradictory term to what you're saying. I think I would like to clarify more. I mean, if
Well,
you
no,
think,
you're right. You're right. And at one level, you're looking at it substantially.
yes, and you
At
said
another
that,
level, you have to look at it, symbolically, because it
yeah,
becomes the intellectualization process.
right. And you said that all of these so-called elements are made out of, I mean, we can think of them on some level made out of matter, atoms, but they all have very different quality into them. And
So, what are the thoughts made of?
like whatever you can think of, electricity or whatever, fire.
Electromagnetics?
Yes, yes. On material level. Um, but what I'm saying is even thoughts can have quality of water, can have quality of earth, fire, space, and so on and so forth.
Right. That's what I was trying to say.
Right. So I'm just want also throw in those kind of perspective. Think of it as a quality of things that we have to take on the path, and also like within our own body, we can see how for consciousness to arise and to flourish and dwell, we kind of have to have these all elements working together. Like earth is kind of like our bones to give us structure. Water is lymph and blood that moving nutrients around, and so on and so forth, like air to bring energy in, and space, maybe thoughts are the space, whatever. Consciousness is spacious quality.
Very
Mind.
good. Let me keep moving on because other people want to speak. So, yes, you're right. You're on to the right idea about this. Kunga, would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you. It made me think about the Foreground of Mindfulness Sutra. There's a section on meditating on the body as body. And after meditating on the anatomy of the body, there's the meditation on the elements. And it's what Alex was started talking back there towards the end. You meditate on your the parts of your body that are like the earth, the bones, you think about the parts of your body that are like the water, the blood, the urine, the sweat. You think about the parts of your body that are like fire, the heat in your belly, the warmth of the body. You think about the air, your breath, and you think about the space. The fact that all these different parts have space, certain amount of space they have to fill up in the body. And just the process of the meditation is to go through and then feel all those elements and to recognize that those elements exist within you and without of you. And it's a way to I think become more comfortable with their impermanence. The idea is in the end, because after this meditation, there's the meditation on the body as a corpse. And so it's that idea of just realizing that you really are nothing but these elements come together, because of causes and conditions. And at some point, you're going to disperse again. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So there's the physical process that's going on, but then there's this intellectual process that's going on also, and then we see this being symbolized in the intellect, and we can apply it to spiritual values, spiritual terms, and so on. So yes. Anybody else have a comment?
Well, sure, I want to say something, and that's when we're talking about the five elements, the emphasis in Buddhism has always been on phenomenal qualities. For instance, earth is identified with hardness, and fire with heat, air with motion, and water with what they usually translate as cohesion. It's what makes things stick together. So generally, the emphasis in Buddhism is always on phenomenal, perceptible qualities as opposed to the material qualities that we think of in the West. So it's not so much, even though the words are the same as used in the Western tradition, it's a slightly different take on the whole thing because all four or all five elements are involved with every physical object. Every physical object has all five of these qualities in various proportions, and that's what makes them up. And it's identified with the phenomenal qualities that I just mentioned.
Yes. So just let me move this just a little bit here because
Oh,
now
you got that right,
so
right.
these are the five modes of action in which this is taking
Very
place.
good.
The cohesion, stability, ripening, movement, and growth. So going back, so the cohesion is the water. If you look at the water, you put it underneath a microscope, you can see that there's all kinds of particles that are in the water. It's not just a pure molecule of water, a pure specimen of water. It's got a lot of things that are in the cohesion of it. And then the earth represents a stability, okay, the firmament. And the ripening is the fire. It's the heat element, it's the ripening. And then the movement is the air, and the space is the growth potential that is within this. So this helps us, we can apply this action now to a learning process, to a contemplative process. what is the cohesion? What is it that we're looking at? What is the stability of the mental process? What's the ripening of the mental process? What's the movement of the mental process? What's the growth of the mental process? So it doesn't have to be just physical. It can be this intellectual, and to take it to the next step, it can be that spiritual mode of action also. So these elements are the elements within all this, and the actions are how we apply these tools, how we apply the elements, and to develop a fundamental, this is a very fundamental understanding of the activity, or yeah, of the activities of the four enlightening, liberating activities. So, anybody else have a comment now, please? Brendan?
Yeah, Lance, I love your focus of these aspects of our physical universe or our physical world. There is a wise Tibetan Lama who said, you need to live in where you are physically, or you're going to miss your whole life if you're mentally always wanting to be somewhere else. And in my neighborhood in Virginia, there's beautiful trees and mountains, and I love American history, and I'm focused on westward expansion and the American Civil War and all of these things that are very violent and very cataclysmic for a lot of people. But I contrast this with a guy named Joe Hollis in North Carolina, who has this mountain gardens. He died a couple of years ago, but he incorporates sustainability, teas, herbs, into Taoism. He loves Taoism. He has a whole library of books on Taoism. So I'm inspired by how he can take the physical universe around him and up in the mountains and make it sustainable and nonviolent. And he's a former Peace Corps volunteer. And yeah, if you're interested in incorporating the physical world that you're describing here into your spirituality, he's a good guy to look up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Lance, I'm like in Taoism, philosophy, it's discussed that the elements can be produced one from another or suppressed one by another. Maybe Kunga or anybody else. Bernie, have you had any references to those transmutations of elements that we come across here and there?
And, unfortunately, my references are all in my head. I can't recall a specific. Oh, yes. Generally, there's a description of the different elements in a rather light text in the Theravadan tradition, which is called the Path of Purification. And in the second volume, it was printed in 2 volumes in the version I had, and it's in the wisdom section. It describes the nature of the objects that exist in the phenomenal world, and it describes the 4 elements and how everything, or 5 elements, and how everything consists of the 5 elements. And it's it's certainly different than our modern scientific point of view, but it's certainly interesting because they tend to view realities made up as, or in the Theravadan at least, realities made up of bundles of phenomenal qualities. So if something smells a certain way and has a certain color and is hard to the touch and all that, it's sort of a bundle of these sensual qualities. The thing is essentially a bundle of these sensual qualities, and that's how that's how it was understood, at least in the Theravadan tradition.
Zara, did you have any comments about this? I don't want to leave you out of the conversation. Do these modes of action and these tools, the elements of phenomenal nature, can you relate to these in terms of being able to transpose them, in the material world, but also in the intellectual world, but also in the spiritual world?
Yes, and Yes, I can. I'm listening mostly because I was in retreat all day, like doing contemplation, and I only logged in because of the sangha. I wanted to be with you guys, but I was off, so my brain's a little. Yes, I'm in listen mode right now, Lance. But yes, I can relate to these things conceptually. Thank you for asking me.
Well, thank you. So, Kunga, Alex specifically asked for your comment. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Oh, I had another thing to add.
Okay.
Um, so there's a teaching where the five elements, well, four of the five elements are used to explain how you might conduct yourself with regard to patience. So it goes whether humans scatter pure or impure substance on the earth never the earth never becomes upset, but it accepts all materials equally. And if you it says learn from the water. When people wash dirty things in it, the water is not sad or disdainful. Learn from fire. Fire burns all things without um preference, I think, something like that. I learned from the air. The air carries all fragrances, whether sweet or foul. And so this idea is that you can take these elements as a metaphor for how we should deal with things that we encounter in our life. And basically the idea is that all things that we encounter in our life, regardless of whether we determine that the thing is something that we consider an obstacle or something that is helpful, we can incorporate all those things into our spiritual path. So just like people, it doesn't matter to the water if you wash dirty or unclean things in it, the water will just accept it, and you can use those things in your path. If people scatter things on the earth that are like rotting food or stuff, the earth just takes it all and composts it all and uses it to grow things out of. Um, and the air carries all fragrances. It doesn't matter what this fragrance is. So in our spiritual path, we can use this idea, the model of the elements, to approach things we encounter in life and incorporate those things to our spiritual path. Thank you.
Thank you. Brendan, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, not beyond what I already said. Thank you.
Okay. So, if we take these five elements of phenomenal nature and we apply them to the five modes of action, there's a direct relationship, between the water and the cohesion and the stability and the earth and the ripening and the fire, the movement and the air and the growth in the space. So they're like they're corollaries to each other. But if we take those five or those 10, those corollaries all being together, and then we matrix them with these activities, and we see how the water, the cohesion, interreacts to become the pacification, the purification, how it becomes the enrichment, the increasing, the magnetizing, the attraction, the subduing, the challenging. And then we move to the next one where the earth does the same four things and so on. And so it becomes an exercise of seeing how these things interrelate with each other, in a physical way, in our phenomenal nature, but also in our knowledge base of our intellect and how we operate, how we think about things, and so on, in a normal intellectual way. How we write, how we communicate with each other, how we communicate with ourselves, and so on. And then we can also take it to the spiritual level, and this is where the Dharma, you see, becomes the framework, becomes the guide on being able to support this, because it starts getting very abstract when we get into the intellectual part, and it gets even more abstract when we get into the spiritual side of things. But the Jewel Ornamental Liberation and such books like that, such teachings like that, give us the support that we need to be able to have a fruitful contemplation meditation, a contemplation that we think things we're going through, and literally what we're doing is we're eliminating things, and we wind up with a purity of just pure spirit, what we might call pure spirit, and that becomes the meditation. When we eliminate all the stuff that we thought it was, that we satisfy all the intellectual stuff, we satisfy all the material stuff, and what we're left with is the spiritual, and that's the meditation. So you can't sit down and say, "Oh, I'm going to meditate," and have this glorious enlightened experience, this liberated experience, without first having to go through this intellectual process of being able to see where things are and be able to liberate our attachment to those things, liberate our clinging to those things. Does that make sense? Alex, what do you think about that?
Um, yes, it's getting more abstract. I hopefully it will sort things out in this confusing world for us. What I don't want to be um, a distraction, but we may also want to think like, how come this system seems to be so complete?
So what?
So complete. Like, why there are 5 elements, not 6 elements? I mean, is really anything we can think of a combination of these 5, or maybe sometimes there is only pure water, only pure fire and earth together. But I think what this is a new to me. What you're saying is new to me. Like how we now combine the elements with modes of action, and what are different results that can be produced. Is that what we're getting into? Like, I'm not sure I'm getting the drift, so to speak.
Well, yeah, this is a metaphor. It's all metaphor for our investigations, for Vipassana meditation. And to be able to apply the Dharma, because, we can apply physical science to help us to understand this at the material level, can't we? And we can apply logic to help us at the intellectual level. But at the spiritual level, it kind of goes beyond those things. And so we need a framework, we need a structure to help us to do that. And this is where the Dharma comes in. And to take it, the Hinayana, where the discipline is, to apply this, and then the middle way teaching of the Mahayana, the devotion, to be able to do this and to be doing it, the motivation for doing this for other beings and so on, and the emptiness aspect of the Mahayana, that all this is intellectually all temporary. It's all just an illusion. And then to take it to the Vajrayana level, where we become the energy. We become that which permeates, which penetrates all this physicality, that penetrates all this emotional intellectualism. And that's why we need something like the Dharma to be able to support us while we're going through that investigation, because it's so abstract. It's very easy to get lost in the stream of consciousness that you're going through, to be able to examine this and to be able to ultimately just relax and stop doing that and just get into the bodhicitta, allow the bodhicitta to unfold. All the distractions, all the discursive thought unfolds, and then what's left is the pure, indestructible wisdom of the bodhicitta, which has the wisdom, the compassion, the joy, and the equanimity. And this is a complete human being. This is what it is to be a complete human being. Isn't that what all this is about? Is to recognize what it is to be a pure, complete human being, to become a awakened one. Bernie, you have any comment?
Well, we're talking about the relationship between the different elements, and it's sort of as metaphors for practice and enlightenment and all that.
Yeah.
What I have to say about that is generally in Buddhist scriptures, they emphasize the positive qualities of the elements. They're not considered being negative things that we have to get through. But for instance, as Kunga said, that they're used as metaphors for positive qualities rather than for negative qualities. Generally, the when we think of transforming or overcoming, it's usually in terms of the kleshas. Now, of course, kleshas can be compared to the elements. For instance, in all traditions, Western and Eastern, desire is compared with fire. And so you'll find that same analogy in Buddhism. And I suppose other negative qualities can be compared to the earth, stubbornness or something like that. But generally, you don't run into these as metaphors so often in Buddhism. And what you run into is when we're talking about overcoming things, we're just talking about either overcoming mental patterns, what we call wholesome dharmas versus the unwholesome dharmas, and generally these the dharmas, the 4 or 5 elements on the level of the skandha of rupa, of form, and we don't, when we're talking about practice, we're talking about the mental factors, the 4th skandha, or the 5th skandha, consciousness. So generally, the focus in terms of practice is on the 4th and 5th skandhas versus the first 3, feeling, uh, uh, form, feeling, and sensations, which are generally taken as they are, and they're not considered either positive or negative, but generally considered neutral. So that's my understanding of it, at least. So that's my point of view. I don't want to contradict anything anybody else says, but that's how I understand the whole presentation of the path of enlightenment generally in terms of Buddhism.
No, very good. Thank you. For sure. Yes. So, what I think that what I'm trying to help everybody prepare themselves for is the teachings on the way of the Bodhisattva. The Geshe Jampa has agreed to teach, and we put forth some questions to him, and he says, all these questions are going to be answered in the way of the Bodhisattva. So let's use that, start, sequentially in that and go through that as a guide. And as we do that, to apply these points of the activities, the elements of phenomenal nature, the modes of action, and so on, and to help us to understand what it is to be a bodhisattva who is on the path of purification, who is on the path of enrichment, who is on the path of magnetizing, and is on the path of challenging, subduing. So this helps us to have a framework, to have a tool, have a mechanism by which we can use to prepare ourselves for the teaching and to process the teaching each time we receive the teaching? Or do we just look at it just at a surface level and don't try and get into the what, the why, and the how, and how it is that, I am part of this?
Lance, is this should this be taken in a way of how do we keep those elements in balance, in harmony, or is it more of a skillful means to use those elements, or maybe like understand their relations with each other?
I think the answer is yes. It's all of that.
Oh, okay.
We're part of nature. We are nature. Nature is us. And to be able to recognize ourselves as these elements,
Okay,
and
maybe in this context, we should also think that these elements are never static. They're in very dynamic relationship with each other.
they harmonize. Exactly
Yeah.
right. That was your term of harmonizing.
Mhm.
That's right. And not to confuse things, but in deity yoga, in the Vajrayana, these five elements have names to them, have personification of dakinis to them. And then, and they have activities that they engage in, which are basically these activities here. And we begin to identify water with a particular dakini. We begin the earth with a particular dakini, a fire, particular dakini, and so on. So the point here is that there's many mechanisms, there's many metaphors used to explain these things. Here, this is the most empirical, the most simple, the most basic way to understand these principles. And see that
What
there's a
about
there's a
Johnny?
dynamism between all this. I said about making the matrix. If you put the matrix together and so on, and you begin to think about this, and you begin to think everything in terms of that matrix, things start changing. I'm sorry, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
Well, sorry, it takes a while to unmute. Um, I Yeah, you mentioned dakinis. We also have 5 Buddha families. I mean, with each color,
And
and there are
these are the
5
modes of action. They become the modes of action.
they become the modes of action.
Yes,
So dakinis is what? Dakinis is qualities or
they're the elements.
the actual element, and the modes of actions are Dhyani Buddhas. Enlightened action, right? So,
Yep.
okay.
Dorje, what translation of Shantidev's Way of the Bodhisattva will we be using?
Well, I think any of them's going to be fine. I got a couple different translations. I got maybe 3 different translations, so I may have all 3 books opened at one time. But it's going to be based on, but Geshe is going to be using his translation. And so I don't know which that is. It's going to be a root text written in Tibetan. So he's not going to be teaching in English per se. He's going to be teaching in Tibetan, and it's going to be translated for us by his brother Dorji. And so I think each of the verses are going to be taken apart and put back together again, and we can apply it to any of the translations we have.
Are you going to be sharing electronic translations that you're recommending, or should we just look online?
I think we can look online. I'm sure that whether 84,000 or Latsawa House has a good translation that we can use. That would probably be the most effective thing because people will be able to go to it themselves, download it if they want, or they can go out and purchase a book.
Okay, I will say the translation I have and was recommended was the Way of the Bodhisattva, published by Shambhala, and it's translated by the Padmakara Translation Group.
That's
I can't
fine.
say that's the best because I certainly haven't read the best, but it's considered a good translation and it should still be available.
I think any of that is fine, whatever anybody wants.
So, but I'm sure they're, well,
Because Geshe is thinking in terms of the Tibetan root text.
okay.
Does that make sense? I mean, is that okay? I mean, I hope
I thought I had that email you had sent me. It sounded like we were going to be reading the text together, so I just wondering what translation we were all going to be reading.
well, from that point of view, you're right, and I think to have if the Pamankara is available online, is that available, Bernie?
It's not, it's something you can buy. Let me see how available it is. Way of the Bodhisattva.
So
I bought it a couple of years ago, so
whether it's that or the Lotsawa house, like I said, or the one on 84,000 is all
yeah,
fine to me.
they're right. There's a free version available from I see it here. It says PDF, so I mean it's just free.
Would you do me a favor and just simplify things and send me a link to that, and then
I'm looking it up online right now. So
I can put it in the WhatsApp and send it out and send it to Kunga, and he can send it to the people that
here's
may come in
here's
on
the
his group, and everybody would have it available that way. And then
here's
we can
the
screen share it at
page.
the same time. But
Here's the
yes, that's
page.
the idea is to read each verse, in sequence,
Um,
and then have Geshe Jampa comment, and then
okay.
have discussion, where it's appropriate, whether it's with each verse or each couple verses, whatever is appropriate. But he wants, and I think everybody else wants, is a good discussion about the verses.
Okay, I am sending the group via WhatsApp the link to it on Amazon. Of course, it's available other places as well, but
Well, that's to purchase it. Can we?
no, it's copyright and you can't get it for free. There's another translation which would be let's see if there are free translations of it as well. I think there was let me see, way of the a PDF. I don't like PDFs myself, but and who knows? Let me see what's available as far as PDF.
All right. Well, we can sort this out later. We don't have to do this right now.
Here we go. Dharma Rain. Oh, is this it's a PDF? Somebody's robbed it.
Let me go back to Kunga and ask him.
Mhm.
Do you have a Way of the Bodhisattva translation that you would like to use?
Um, no, I don't have a particular favorite. I'm familiar with the one that Bernie Brett mentioned because we have copies of that at the temple.
The
Uh,
Pamakkara one.
I think it's the same one. It has a picture of a bodhisattva statue on the cover. It's red. It's got that like a lounging bodhisattva on the
Right.
cover. Is that the one?
That's it. That's it. Here's a link I will send around a link to a PDF of the book. I think it's bootlegged, so it depends upon your opinion of uh, online piracy, whether you want it or
Well,
not.
let's try and find something that's pretty authentic.
So the book, you can get it online as a PDF from this site. I don't know the legality of it, but it looks like it's a strict uh, copy of the book. So the same translation I was just mentioning. So if somebody's too poor to buy the book or stingy, whatever, it's available that way too.
Okay. Well, let me ask a question to everybody that's here. There's 6 people here tonight. Um, is everybody going to join the Way of the Bodhisattva with Geshe?
I am.
Yeah.
And Kunga specifically said that he was thinking about sharing it with his group up in Michigan. And is that something you're going to carry forward? Is you going to be able to do that? Do you want to do that?
Yeah, I do want to do it. I'm waiting for the board to approve it because it's not, whenever it's not something that we're doing specifically, we're doing from another group, the board has to approve it. So I'm just waiting on that, but I don't think it'll be a problem. So we should be able to put it in our newsletter and put it at the temple.
And
And
it's the yes.
I was just thinking, could you also share it with Drupan's group, the 3-year refuge group, or Urban Dharma in Asheville? Because
I'm
it's
not
gonna,
going to do that.
no, okay.
No, because I don't want to step on anybody's toes.
I was gonna send it to a couple of friends and suggest, but I was just curious if you wanted a broader reach because Zoom has been a really great platform, and that's how I came across the Karma series with Dr. Lai from Urban Dharma. Was someone just shared it in the group text as an advert, like the flyer.
Well, not to get in the weeds with this, but Geshe Jampa comes from the Galupa tradition, and everything that you're doing right now is Jikun Kagyu. So, some people can get, a little bit, saying, well, you got to stay within the proper tradition, within the proper lineage.
Well, of course, Geisha is from the Gelugpa tradition. I don't think there'll be any trouble with anybody from any tradition, Tibetan tradition, studying this text. And I know it's even considered popular among Zen Buddhist students because there's not really a tremendous amount on bodhicitta in the Zen tradition. And this is a text that is well received even in the Zen tradition,
Yes,
modern Zen tradition, that is. So.
it's all true. And sometimes we're more liberal than some other people.
What Lance, could you give a hint on what is the level of this text? Is it for beginners? Is it advanced? Is it like more intermediate?
Oh,
Like
this is
what
for
background?
everybody. This is for everybody.
Okay.
I
Cool.
mean, I've received teachings on this several different times at Dharma Surya and especially up at TMC. Kenshin taught on this and Drupan taught on this and Kempo Sultram taught on this.
It's not a difficult text and it's generally popular
Yeah.
with the general audience, which is what makes it so famous. The story behind it is that the guy who taught it was not regarded very well, and he was asked one day to give a teaching, and he gave a teaching on bodhicitta. And it was this text, The Way of the Bodhisattva, talks about the 6 perfections, and anybody who's interested in understanding what the six perfections are and how to practice them will get value from taking a class on this text.
Mhm. Thank you. That helped. If I want to share with somebody.
Yeah, it's the behavior of the bodhisattva on the path, the way of the bodhisattva, and goes into the what, the why, and the how.
Wonderful.
Well, does anybody else have any comments about the enlightened activities or the elements or the activity or the actions, 5 modes of actions?
Well, well, if we have time, I mean, maybe you could explain a little further about 5 modes of action, because when I look at this, some of this is kind of quality, but some of this is action, like doing something.
Well, what's doing something?
Well, like ripening. I mean, that's a quality of change. But stability,
Are you personally in a mode of ripening?
yes, yes, I hope
Okay.
so.
Are you in a mode of cohesion?
To some degree, maybe.
Okay.
Well,
And what
those are
about
my
what about the others? What about stability and movement and growth? Are you in those modes?
okay. So these are all not actually action, but mode. Okay, so
They
it's
are.
more like a quality of action
It's it's
rather
it's
than action itself.
it's a nature. There's a cohesion nature. There's a
Mhm.
stability nature. There's a ripening nature. There's a movement nature and a growth nature.
So it is a types of change, type of kind of action that is that each element has it, or each element can have all these 5 different modes of action. Does each element has its own? I guess its element has its own preferred one, right?
Well, the nature of water, the nature of water is not the same as the nature of earth,
Yeah.
and that's why it's an element. It's not a hybrid. The elements are pure elements, pure water, pure earth, pure air, etc.
Okay. Okay, I think I'm getting it better. Like
And then and then
it
the
is
modes of action, the modes of
quality of
action
action.
then become the combinations of the elements.
Could you
So
say that again?
the modes of action become the combination of the elements. So the cohesion can be the cohesion of water and earth together. You
Hmm.
can you can mix water and earth together, right?
Yes.
But you can't really mix water and fire to the degree
Yeah.
that you'll get steam. If that's your result, if that's what you're looking for, you can say it that way.
All right.
You know, but to show the movement of the earth, that's a pretty dramatic thing. You could show the movement of Earth in terms of earthquakes or volcanoes. You could show the Earth and fire as the movement of volcanoes, of magma. You could think of it in terms of the spinning of the Earth. And you could think of the tides as part of that dynamic too. That the celestial body of the moon is controlling the tides. So the elements are the elements, and the modes of action are the myriad combinations of those elements.
Amadorje, um, is it ever taught that the modes of actions are like a path moving from cohesion to growth, like
It's
a
more like a
linear path,
gyroscope. It's more like a gyroscope. You know what a gyroscope is?
something that keeps you level?
Well, that's its function, yes. That's what it does. But the point is, it's got an axis to it, and all these things are spinning around it, and it maintains its balance in whatever attitude it's placed. And it's showing the dynamic stability, if you will, of phenomenal nature as it is, and showing that it's made up of these five elements. And by all that coming together, this gyroscope, if you will, is a metaphor for the earth, for our world. The earth is spinning around on its axis. And that axis is even shifting. They say that the degree in which the center axis is actually moving in our lifetime, they're saying.
So
So in that way, it's
it,
like a gyroscope.
yeah.
So these are things that we take for granted that are invisible to us, until we start getting into the metaphysics of it. And the metaphysics of it, that takes us into this spiritual aspect, to the spirituality of it, the metaphysics of it.
So I think it helps to understand the mode of action of the mind as well, and how
That's
a
correct.
mind can be applied in a variety of ways.
That's correct. Because all this is a mind game, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we're directing our mind to look at these things in these ways in order to look at the multiplicity of all the possibilities, you know, and be able to say all this is all phenomenal nature, all this is temporary, and that the essence of whatever name you want for it, this non-duality, non-objectifiable reality is something that cuts through all of this. And that's what we're preparing ourselves for.
Yeah. So that is something to help us guide on bodhisattva path, and be able to deal with a variety of situations and challenges that we encounter along the path,
Correct.
and overcome different obstacles.
And this is what
Right?
the play in full was really doing. It was taking all these dynamics of the activities, the elements, and the modes of action, and putting them in all different combinations of way of looking at it. The gateways of the Dharma was my favorite.
Yeah.
So, it's all interconnected, isn't it? That's why it's spirituality, because it's all interconnected. It's all part, it's what nature is, it's what we are. And to be able to see ourselves as that way is to see ourselves as God, to see ourselves as true nature, to see ourselves as Buddha, you know, and we, you know, to see ourselves, recognize ourselves as illusory. It's all just fabricated. And that's the liberation.
Yeah.
Human beings made all this. This all comes up out of the human mind.
If there is some point in these teachings where they uh, arrive at the maybe that elements is also in essence not really like elements as we
But they
want to think
themselves are
of it.
illusory?
Yes, and they're like primordially made out of the same stuff or something like that.
Of course. Yeah. We call it the absolute, which is made of unobtainium.
Huh.
Pretty like that. On the
From
periodic chart, where on the periodic chart does that appear? Unobtainium.
yes, uh, physicists call it string theory. Everything is just vibration of some kind of string.
Yeah, whatever man can dream up.
Some kind of mode of motion of something.
Yeah.
Alex, I was waiting for you to bring up string theory in this context. See what's coming.
I couldn't help. Yeah. Yeah. And even then, there are hundreds of string theories that can be created.
Yeah. Have you heard of plane theory?
I thought of
Brain. That's it.
brain. Yeah,
Brain,
this is
but not
yeah,
not Brain. It's Brane.
yes. Yes.
Yes.
Well, this
Everything that there's sheets of universes that are sheets that are lined up like this, and every now and then they bump into each other, and that becomes a a um, um, a big bang when the brains bang into each other, and then here comes this huge explosion and this transference of energy that becomes new matter.
yeah, that's an interesting way to put that. Uh,
Uh, Anybody studies cosmology these days knows it's all messed up by the observations. We don't have any theory that fits the observations that are coming down so rapidly. They can't figure out what's going on
Yeah.
right now. So we're going to need a new theory, but that has nothing to do particularly with Buddhism. So
Well, it does in the sense that all these things are creations of man at this point. And for us to be able to fathom any other creator is, you know, unobtainium to us. All we can recognize is that what we call that vibration, and we just, we designate this vibration as being a connection point between all of us. But even that is conceptual. And that's what the Buddhism gives us support to be able to contemplate that without losing our sense of mental balance. Otherwise, we think we're going crazy because it gets so far out, and there's no, it's like walking a tightrope with no net below it. So Buddhism is a system of support to be able to let your mind go. And therein comes the freedom. So I hope this was useful in some way, and if you feel it's not for you, we can talk about it.
It is for me, Lance, as is that lovely wallpaper picture that we're looking at. Any way you could send that to us on WhatsApp?
What wallpaper picture is that?
It looks like some type of Tibetan Buddhist mural.
Oh, you mean behind me? Not
Yeah.
behind me, but you mean my wallpaper?
Yeah, your wallpaper. Is that an image you could share?
Yeah, wait a second.
All right.
I can send it to you.
Thank you.
Wait a minute, let me
Whenever
just.
you're convenient. No pressure.
This is the interior of the Great Lotus Stupa in Lumbini in Nepal.
Wow.
So when we went on retreat now 20 years ago, we were there for the dedication of this. So, and I got a DVD, a video of our tour through this. So if this is something you'd like, I can send it to you, sure.
Thank you.
So is this how big is this really is?
What's that? That
Like
stupa?
what is the scale of objects there?
It's the biggest stupa I've been in. It's not as big as Buddhanath or Swayambhu up in Kathmandu, but it's very big.
So
It's
when you get inside, can you stand up in a full
Oh yeah,
height?
you can get a couple hundred people in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Like
If you
place
like,
of
I tell
labor.
you what, this would be a good topic for next week. Is I'll share the video with you, and I'll narrate the video
Oh, that would be lovely, yeah.
of our trip on pilgrimage to India and to Nepal for the it was for the consecration of that stupa. So you'll see it and everything, and I think you'll really enjoy it.
And I think the stupa, talking about that, I think the stupa also have some kind of representation of elements in it, isn't it?
Well, certainly, the stupa is a representation of the elements. Yes.
With different shapes that get into construction of the
It's got
stupa.
dakinis flying around, dakas flying around, mahasiddhas flying around. It's quite something. Now, all this, of course, is figurative. All right. Well, unless somebody else has another comment or question, we've reached our time for tonight. So thank you again. I hope this is helpful. If you want to talk about it some more one-on-one, I'll be happy to, have a conversation with you about it. I hope it wasn't too far out and didn't put you off. But at the same time, it's, I think like I said, it's empirical, so all the other things are fundamentally stacked on this. So it'll become clearer and clearer the more that you are investigating the more that you are enriching, the more that you are increasing your knowledge and so on like that, it will come into sharper focus and practicality of purpose.
Good. We'll be looking forward.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I'll say the dedication prayer, the short day karma prayer. By the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Sri Kumpal Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, Master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all very much for your comments and effort to try and get this understood together. Thank you.
You, Lance.
All
Good
right,
night.
see you next week. Cheery, bye bye.
Lots of good philosophy today.